Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got a new load that we've never tested before and it's very interesting, and I can tell you right now it's going to be a very stout load on the shoulder, that's for sure. But how can it actually perform? And as for that shell I've got today, I brought out some of the Remington Express buckshot loads. However, these ones are their 12 gauge 3.5 inch 18 pellet load of double aught buck, and surprisingly enough there is no velocity claim on this box anywhere at all. But we'll have the chronograph to see what we get. Either way, a 3.5 inch 18 pellet load of double aught buck is a very stout shell. There's no question about that. So we'll see what these can actually do, since here recently, the Remington Express buckshot loads have been performing surprisingly decent. And as for the setup we've got to run them through, I brought out my Mossberg 835 Ulti-Mag, which has a 3.5 inch chamber. And for a choke, the box suggests a full choke is best, and that is exactly what I've got in the gun right now, is the stock factory full choke. Now yes, these 835s are overbored to a 10 gauge bore size. Will that have any massive effects on what we see for pattern out of those shells? I don't know, maybe, maybe not, but we'll see, since this is my only shotgun with a 3.5 inch chamber. In theory, they should perform pretty well through it, because we've seen this do well with a number of other buckshot loads, so we'll see what happens. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our actual velocity and see what those shells are really moving. And I've got the templates that we can lay up over our results as well. So let's head over here and take this shot and see just what these 3.5 inch 18 pellet Remington Express shells can actually do. I guess it could go either way with them being a Remington shell. They could be absolutely over designed, or they could be very solid performers. I don't know. So let's go over here and take the shot and see what they give us. Alright, so that shell gave us 1141 through the chrono. Now, since there's no claim on the box, I will look it up and put a note on the screen here if I can find it on their website as to what the claim is. But 1141 for an 18 pellet load of double aught is probably pretty realistic, all things considered, since that is a pretty hefty load. So there's nothing too strange to see for a velocity, but what kind of a pattern did they give us down at 40? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down at our 40 yard paper, and this is what we got. Now for a reference, the white dot was my point of aim. The paper's 36 inches wide by probably about 42 to 44 inches tall. And believe it or not, even though it's an 18 pellet load, as per what the box says, we had 19 pellets that actually hit the paper. And it's very clearly that it's 19 pellets. Every last one of those holes is perfectly round and circular, with the tiny little bit of gray lead mark right on the edges of the paper. So clearly, it's 19 pellets that was in that particular shell. So is it just a one-off with this one particular shell? I don't know, maybe. Or is it just quality control with Remington shells in general? I'm curious to see how many pellets are in the rest of them as we continue to test those shells. And another note before I forget, Remington must be using some really hard primers on those shells. I have never once ever had a misfire in that 835, but on that particular shell, I had to recycle it about 7 times before it actually went off. So there's definitely something to take note of there, because that never happens with that 835. But anyway, I did measure farthest 2 points across, and at 40 yards out of 19 pellets, we had a total of a 20-inch spread. So yeah, not bad whatsoever. I'll take that all day long. 19 pellets worth of double aught buck at 1140 something feet per second and a 20-inch spread at 40 yards. That's going to get it done without a doubt. So once again, it seems like these newer Remington Express shells seem to be surprisingly decent, especially considering what they used to be a couple of years ago. So definitely not looking bad at all on the blank sheet of paper here. But let's throw a couple templates up and see how they actually look in some more real life scenarios. Alright, so here's our 10-inch circle, and if we line it up with the actual core of our pattern, we would have had 7 pellets in a 10-inch circle at 40 yards. And there's several more that are just barely missing, especially up there at the very top, barely missing out on a 10-inch circle. So for what should be technically an 18 pellet load, 7 pellets isn't terrible. And clearly, 7 pellets of double aught buck through the vitals of something at 40 yards like that is going to be more than enough. So definitely not looking bad there, but let's swap over to some animal templates and see how it actually looks in a hunting scenario. Alright, so first up here is the deer template, and if we line it up with our point of aim there, it's pretty obvious that you would have had pretty much all of your load hit that deer. So yeah, I don't think that deer's gonna move anywhere at all on you on that one. If he does, he ain't going far, I can tell you that. So yeah, that is very impressive, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it that that is absolutely gonna drop the hammer on a deer all day long. So that pretty much speaks for itself right there. Looking plenty good enough to take out on a deer hunt without a doubt. But let's swap over to the hog template since I have it out here. I think it's going to be pretty much the same story, but we'll at least take a quick look at it. And here's that hog template, and it's just like I suspected, the same story. Definitely more than good enough to take out on a hog hunt without a doubt. That's going to absolutely crush them. So overall here, for a Remington Express shell, that's a pretty basic load overall. They don't have any kind of fancy plating to them. They don't have a wad. They are buffered, which definitely does help. But it seems like they're some pretty decent performers. And it seems like Remington has done a little bit of something here in the past year or two to up their game a little bit with the Express buckshot line, because that's a pattern that you probably wouldn't have gotten out of a shell a handful of years ago. So definitely can't complain about that one bit. Now I'm definitely curious to see how these continue to perform through a couple of other chokes, and if we continue to have primer issues where they don't fire, and if we also still have 19 pellets instead of 18 in the shell. Is it just a little bit of quality control issues? That I don't know. We're just gonna have to test them a bunch more and see what happens. But at the end of the day here, that's a pattern you can't really argue with. And I wouldn't be scared in the slightest to take it out on a hunt, as long as I know my shell's going to actually fire when I pull the trigger. But for a pattern, that's definitely pretty nice right there, I'd say. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? Definitely looks pretty good to me. I don't think there's much we can complain about there as far as a pattern goes. Now, quality control, I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit different story. We're just gonna have to see what happens down the road. But for a pattern, definitely can't complain for a Remington Express shell. That's more than good enough to take out on a deer hunt or a hog hunt or anything like that. That's gonna be absolutely devastating, having 18 or potentially 19 pellets worth of double-aught buck all hitting the side of a deer. He's most likely not gonna go anywhere on you, that's for sure. So no complaints from me on that pattern whatsoever. But I guess leave all your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of the Remington Express shells or any of the 3.5-inch Express shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? And if you have shot some, have you also experienced the same kind of oddball things that I did today, where you have extra pellets or the shell doesn't fire or something like that? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm gonna get back to it. As always, we got the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like to. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it. But I'm gonna get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.